Hey, and welcome back to Euphrates Talks Transformers. It's been a while, a very long while, but that's not important, because today we're talking about reissues. Now, reissues, specifically in the Transformers scene, are absolutely nothing new. The first reissues in the Transformers franchise literally came in the second year, when they started adding the rub signs so you could distinguish the genuine article from the absolute deluge of bootlegs on the market. Now, over the years, Hasbro's reissued damn near everything they possibly can, from G1 to Beast Wars to the Golden Lagoon figures for some reason, and most of these have been fine. But some of them have problems, which I'm going to get into, trust me. Now I, like pretty much any other collector, own my fair share of reissues. Almost all of my G1 toys are reissues, almost all of my Beast Wars toys are reissues. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with owning reissues, but the problem comes when the reissues themselves are not very good. There's one specific factor that contributes more than anything to the problems with modern reissues. Even just modern mold reuses in general. There's one issue that could make even the most legendary figures look like a pile of shit. One issue that can permanently ruin a figure's reputation in the community. One issue that there's no real fix for. Mold degradation. Transformers, being pieces of plastic, as they are made using injection molding. And the process of injection molding is basically taking two big honkin' pieces of metal with a little gap in the middle in a specific shape and injecting plastic into it. Now, this process works for a time, but all molds eventually are supposed to be retired. The more times that an injection mold is used, the weaker it gets. And eventually, the molds will break. This has happened to a handful of G1 molds, a handful of Beast Wars molds, just a handful of molds in general. And usually, there's nothing you can do to fix that. Now, in some cases, companies can attempt to rebuild a broken mold, or in some cases, they'll take a pristine copy of whatever they need to mold, and they'll make a negative of it, and then use that to create new tooling, which is how we end up with stuff like this. Now, this just sounds like I'm bashing reissues and being like, oh, don't buy reissues, but that's absolutely not what I'm talking about here. Reissues can be great if they're done right. You know, a few tweaks to the CAD, just have CAD models in general, so that you can create new molds on the fly, or just anything done to keep the molds from getting lost or broken. And here's just a couple of good examples. My G1 Soundwave. This is a reissue. I have absolutely no idea which one it is, what year it came from, where it came from. I got this secondhand at a toy store. This came loose, secondhand, with no tapes, missing almost all of the stickers, but it feels very, very solid. Like, he's not going anywhere. My G1 Bumblebee. Now, this is the 2018 reissue with the cartoon-styled head, but this just adds to my point. They tweaked the CAD, they had to make a new mold for that, and this thing feels great in the hand. Like, his arms will stay straight out, they won't, like, flop down. Like, he's been standing like this for years. And of course, the golden child, the love of my life, G1 Gears. I don't own an original G1 Gears. This is the 2018 reissue, but this still feels proper. Like, his arms aren't falling down, his legs aren't loose, he transforms back and forth perfectly fine. Just all around a good time. I guess that goes for my reissue Swerve too, but and that's not even just a testament to reissues. I have this original G1 Warpath that still feels very solid in the hand. This thing is older than I am, and I've had it my entire life, and it still feels nice and solid. But what the fuck happened here? The 2021 Beast Wars reissues are probably some of the worst toys I have ever held in my hands. I may only have a couple of them, but this is a show. The only one that I own that has even remotely acceptable QC is Tigatron. And even still, some of the joints are too tight, some of them are too loose, some of them are both too tight and too loose at the same time. Not to mention, Tigatron is the only one I have a direct line of comparison for. This is my Fox Kids Cheetor. I got this at a flea market for like 20 bucks. It's broken and it still feels nicer in hand than this. Now, I've already talked at length about my issues with the Rat Trap reissue, which I think are pretty apparent, but this just makes it even more embarrassing. This was one of my holy grails for the longest time. This is Transmetal's Rat Trap, obviously, and his leg ball joints are still nice and tight. It's very easy to get him standing. Meanwhile, I can't get this to stand up at all. Now, I get that reissuing Rat Trap was a challenge for Hasbro, because the mold was broken or deteriorated in some way, and they had to rebuild it. But I really think we all would have been better off if they just hadn't. I get that for the 25th anniversary of Beast Wars, they really wanted to have, like, the main maximal cast available for people to buy. But I feel like that shouldn't have to come with so many caveats, because this is unacceptable. Like, when you have a figure like this with such a glaringly bad QC issue that affects both modes, because these loose ball joints will make the legs just fall out of the rat mode, because they have nowhere to tab in, you really just shouldn't bother releasing that. I don't think anyone would have complained either. Nobody really bought the Beast Wars reissues, outside of Optimus and Megatron. Speaking of Optimus, I don't think he's supposed to do this. Obviously, I don't have, like, an original sample on hand, but, like, really? I get that it's in service of the, like, chest-beating gimmick, but that doesn't even work on mine. Like, his arms just look wonky. Oh, and yeah, that happens too. The swords just constantly fall out. Not to mention, when I first got this out of the box, it could not stand up. I ended up having to put duct tape in the ball sockets on his legs just for him to be able to stand up. And even then, he's not too great at that. And I don't think there's necessarily anyone to blame for the problems with these reissues, because it seems like the most common problem they have is that the ball joints are just loose, which is clearly something that Hasbro knows how to fix. Some figures recently have had textured ball joints, just to give them that little bit of extra grip, and it's worked wonders for stability. So I think something like that should just become the standard, or Hasbro should just stop using ball joints for everything. Now again, I'm not just bashing reissues here, because this isn't just a problem with reissues. If a mold is used again and again and again, as I mentioned, that causes mass deterioration. And that doesn't even have to be over the period of a long time. This is Legacy Wreck and Rule Collection Spindle, based on the Kingdom Paleotrex mold, which got like 5 or 6 reuses all within not even 2 years, and is now basically unusable. This figure is notorious for having so many loose joints that it's impossible to do anything with. These mushroom pegs that form the wrists are so loose that you can just pop them straight out with no resistance whatsoever, and those become the ankles of the dinosaur mode. How well do you think that stands up? Both of his knees essentially have no resistance to moving them, and the tolerances on anything that needs to peg in are so bad that it won't stay together. It even fell apart more when it hit the ground. And this isn't even just an issue with the Kingdom Paleotrex mold. Any mold that intentionally can come apart and has been reused more than once is awful. I've heard complaints about people's Legacy Dions just completely falling apart because that mold retains Cup's stupid being able to be ripped apart gimmick, which wasn't even good when they used it for Cup. And have you seen the original G1 Hound compared to the current one? And I've heard that the reuses of the Studio Series Blur mold have just kept making his arm cable looser and looser. And it seems that pretty much any time a mold is reused in Studio Series, everything goes to shit. A couple of years ago, there were these Target exclusive 2-packs. There was one that was Clunker Bumblebee and 2018 Bumblebee, and there was one that was Clunker Bumblebee and Studio Series Barricade. There was one of those sitting at my local Target for well over a year, and the Clunker Bumblebee in that pack was completely smashed, and they only discounted it by like $1. It was literally falling apart in the package, just because of how many times that mold got pumped out over the course of 2 years. Like, do you see the problem here? And I understand that the most expensive part of the process of making a toy is getting the tooling made, and I get that that's why they do partials, or as we call them, retools, so often. But reusing parts of those molds is eventually going to lead to problems. And obviously it already has. I did a quick dive into this, and let's set the cutoff point at 2019 with Siege. Every single mainline mold from Siege Wave 1 to the end of Kingdom has been reused at least once, except for Apeface and Snapdragon. Like, that's a lot of shared parts going around, and that's a lot of molds to degrade over time. And you'd think, oh, this only applies to mainline stuff, blah, 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 whatever. No. High-end collectors deal with this problem just as much as we do. I've seen a lot of the later reuses of MP10 have issues with their legs, which are either uselessly loose, or they just completely break off. And I feel like the saddest part of all of this is the people who aren't collectors. The people who buy reissues just for the sake of nostalgia. Like the people who owned the original toys as kids and go, oh, I remember that. And for those people, if the reissues are of poor quality and they're just falling apart in their hands, that's like walking up to an old friend you haven't seen in a long time, and when you go to shake their hand, they just kinda, you know? And reissues are often the sort of thing that could get people to get back into collecting. But if the reissues are poor quality, they're not going to want to get back into collecting, because that's just what they're going to think all Transformers are like. I know that this video has been a lot of just me ranting and rambling, but I just have a lot of strong feelings about this topic. Because the entire point of reissues is for people who couldn't get the figures when they were available originally to get them now. And I think they should live up to the quality of what they were like originally. And that's not what we're getting. And I'm not saying that they should stop making reissues. That is the exact opposite of what I want, actually. Because there are so many figures that I was never able to get a hold of that are just skyrocketing in value right now. And I want to be able to get my hands on those figures. I want everyone to be able to get their hands on any figures that they might have missed, but not at the cost of their quality. I understand that the quality has to drop over time. That's just, you know, passage of time. That's just how it works. All materials slowly degrade over time. But a lot of the time, the CAD files are still available. More of these molds could be made. I get that it's a ridiculously expensive process, but that's what needs to be happening. If they reissue something, they should not be using the original mold a lot of the time, because those were not made to last forever. And this point doesn't just apply to toy manufacturing. This is my Unicomp Model M. This is a keyboard based on a keyboard from the 80s. Now, the reason I bring this up is because Unicomp actually bought the tooling for these keyboards from Lexmark, who had a hand in manufacturing the original IBM ones. And over time, these began to degrade until Unicomp started making their own tooling. Now, I lucked out getting a second-hand one that was only manufactured in 2008. However, the ones that were manufactured in like 2012 and later had problems with the internals cracking, because the tooling wasn't made to last that long. This is an issue that applies to all manufacturing processes, especially things involving plastic, because tooling quality will always drop. And eventually, any product produced with tooling that's on its way out will just be completely unusable, like those later run Model Ms, or like certain reissues. All I did was transform it, and his leg fell off. And depending on the type of mold that was used for something, it's not even a guarantee it'll last as long as they need it to. There are different types of injection molds, and obviously the less that they need to produce, the cheaper it is to make the mold, because it's not going to last nearly as long. And it doesn't need to. And obviously Hasbro's going to need to use the more expensive molds, because they need to be able to produce hundreds of thousands, up to millions of copies of figures. But after it's done with its initial run of those hundreds of thousands to millions of figures, they need to either put certain precautions in place to keep the molds from degrading as fast, or they need to put more thought and care and time into reconstructing molds, so we don't end up with stuff like this. So what am I trying to say here? All I think needs to happen is Hasbro needs to take better care of their molds, or they need to watch how much they're using them. Because as I've said many times throughout this video, molds are not designed to last forever. And reissuing something after the mold has just been sitting for 30 years isn't the right way to go about it. So does this mean that I'm going to stop buying reissues or repaints or retools? No, of course not. Some of my favorite characters are repaints. But I'm going to remain cautiously optimistic that something's going to change. Because I know that I am not the only person who's complained about the Beast Wars reissues. I wasn't sure how this video was going to end up when I started it. I've been working on this video for like months, basically just gathering stuff to talk about. And you know, if you've stuck with me this long, I don't know how long this video is going to be, but hey, thanks for making it to the end of this video, I guess. And a special thanks to today's sponsor. Hey, do you like Transformers? I'd assume so, because this is a Transformers show. If you do, and you also like really, really dumb jokes about
Red Fanta,
robotic diarrhea,
Devastator's missing scrotum,
your severe drinking problem,
then you might just enjoy Transformers Radicular. It's a Transformers-based comedy series made by and starring my good buddy Clanzo. And despite it being a Transformers series, it is absolutely 100% not made for kids. If this was on TV, it would be rated like TV 14 or something. And if you're just interested in all things Clanzo, which I mean, how could you not be, then keep your eyes peeled for a certain other project in the works. Cringy sponsor segment aside, you guys should actually go watch Transformers Radicular. It's absolutely fantastic, and I might be joining the voice cast soon. So this is actually the end of this video, though. I've run out of talking points. I have like a whole document here, and I've gone through everything that's in it. But I will leave you with this. I'm really hopeful for the future that we end up getting more good reissues, like my G1 reissues that I talked about. I love those things. And I hope that when the Beast Wars figures inevitably get reissued again, they fix the problems with them. Because let's face it, the ones that we just got are not good. But I don't want to end this video on a negative note. So hey, G1 reissues are fantastic, for the most part. Bye.